Okay, today's going to be a tree work video because I'm getting ready to work on trees. And I got my new Buckingham throttle device in. I'm moving into the modern age. In the 70s, I started tree work using Blake's hitch to get into trees to climb and descend a rope in the tree and all that, in the 70s. And then I went to a split tail Blake's hitch system, and I used that up until modern day today, because I have a few acres of property, and I have trees, and you just got to maintain your property, and also when a tree dies, you want to take it down and cut it up for firewood, whatnot. But anyway, I've had a few careers in my life. Tree work, one of them. I learned how to do tree work when I was a youngster with my dad's business, and later on in life I had my own tree company, did a lot of climbing and so forth. The thing is, I'm old. A lot of people don't realize, man, you did this, you did that in your life, and how could you do all those things? Well, when your lifespan has spanned decades, a few years doing this, a few years doing that, it all adds up. It all adds up. It's not, some people, they say when they're in school, they're young and they're in school, and they say, well, I want to graduate from high school and go to the university, and I want to study mathematics, or I want to study to be an accountant or something like that, right? And then they spend their whole life going from the lower level Louis kick around newbie in the field to being the expert in the field by the end of their lifespan. I'm not that type of person. I get bored easy. I can't sit around and do the same thing over and over and over. I'm not that type. I've always been like a sponge for knowledge of things. Let's say you go in the military. Your minimum enlistment is, they used to have different packages, 4, 6 year, like that for the U.S. military, but now I think the standard is 4 years, and then you could be a reservist if you want, things like that. So you could, and then other countries, you got a minimum of 4 years or 5 years, and some you could go, they just got different packages, but you go 4 or 5 years, let's say, in the Army, and then what? Let's say you live to be 80 years old. What's 4 years out of 80? What about the rest of those years? What'd you do then? You could do a lot of things in 80 years. You don't have to be locked into one thing and only know one thing. That's the thing about this channel. I talk about a lot of different things, but I've done a lot of different things. I have done a lot of different things. I've had probably, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 careers, something like that. I've never really sat down and thought about it. But, I went to college later in life, and so I know something about, I know a few things, and then I went to professional schools. I've gone to, and been instructed so many different disciplines. Done survival school, and jumped out of aircraft, and I've just done so many things. My whole life has been one adventure after another. That this has kept me entertained. Some people say I'm crazy, but it's kept me. It has kept me entertained. You know, I like new and interesting things and whatnot. Well, since I've spent most of my lifespan with rudimentary tree climbing stuff, and I did do other climbing though. So when I was a little lad, I started out with my axes, and I was the designated limber. You know, at the job site, I was going around limbing trees and all that stuff, and doing little crap work. You know, that they give a kid. You know, I'm talking about when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. You know, at a job site. Back before they would say anything to somebody, you know, employing their kid, right? So my dad grew up in the Great Depression. My grandfather, during the Great Depression, he was a moonshiner, and my dad would do deliveries of moonshine during the Great Depression. He'd deliver it in vinegar bottles because it was clear, and vinegar is clear, right? You can get clear vinegar. So nobody suspected 1-gallon vinegar bottles, which had, you know, the vinegar had been dumped out into other containers and rinsed out and then filled with moonshine, right? So you had to do things to stay alive, right? So one thing that I learned from my dad, I learned a lot of great things from my dad and my grandfather. One of the things that I learned is that the more you know, the more valuable you are as a person, and the easier it is for you to get work when there's bad times. So my dad was a moonshiner. He was a carpenter. He was a welder. He was an electrician. He did all these different disciplines. So whenever somebody needed something, he'd say, I could do that. You see. And I thought about that a lot when I was young. And I said, you know, there's a lot of wisdom to be had with that, to know so much that you can get by doing practically anything, you know. So I learned tree work when I was a boy from my dad, and I worked for him for free. I and my one brother had several brothers, and anyway, most everybody's gone now, but you know, I have had several careers doing different things, electronics, and I had my own tree business for a few years, did that, you know, military stuff, retail. You know, when I was a youngster, I bagged groceries like a lot of kids do at the grocery store. You know, you bag groceries and whatnot. You know, and in everything that I've done, I've always tried to do the best that I could do. You know. But what is all this about? All this yakking about me and my lifespan. You know, I've been around for decades, and it just seems like it just never ends. You know, I mean, I look back I can remember when I was a child, real young, playing with Tonka trucks, you know, which were steel back then, and I had International Harvester tractors toy tractors and stuff that came from, you could buy from Harvester. They were steel toys. You know, I had those. I had Tonka trucks, real Tonka trucks. You know, the steel ones that you could put a kid on top of that dump truck and push him around and it didn't break. You know, that's how well they made stuff back in those days. But I can remember way back then. You know, and it just seems like that was so long ago. So long ago. And I have seen the world change so much. The world and this country right now. This is not the same. The United States is not the same country as it was when I was young. When I was young, things were so much different. Things were 100% different. People were different. I don't even know how to describe it. People were different. It's just so long ago. You know, and that's why I consider, like, different things that I've done in my lifespan, I consider those chapters in my book. You know, chapters. Some chapters I really liked, some chapters I really never wanted to go back to because, you know, I've changed my tune about certain things, you know. Became closer to God. You know, I'd almost been killed several times. I've been spoken to by God twice in my whole lifespan. I could hear him talking to me like somebody's talking to you right now on this video, right? Like I'm talking to you right now. I could hear him plain as day, but soft. It was just such a soothing voice, comforting. The Lord spoke to me twice, you know, and I'll never forget it, you know, and I can't wait to meet him, you know, finally in person at some point, because I know God is real. A lot of people are confused out there. Some people have been envious when I've told them about this before, you know, about God speaking to me twice in my whole life. And it makes me yearn for that conversation to continue with him, because it was so reassuring, you know, like your dad putting his hand on your shoulder when you're young and say, "Don't worry, son, I got you. You know, I got you. Don't worry." And hits me here, you know, hits me right there. I've run out of time on this video, and I haven't said a whole lot of nothing. Sitting here in this tree harness, this is a Buckingham. And I got several harnesses and ropes up there to recommend, a couple of chainsaws. Guys getting into tree work. Maybe they're going to do tree work around their home. Maybe they want to go work for a company and start off in tree work, whatnot. So I'm going to talk a little bit about tree work and tree equipment. I cut down a tree a few days ago. I got it on camera, but the file was corrupt. So guess what? We don't get to see it. Anyway, I felled this tree, this dead tree. I felled this dead tree. It's back over yonder there. And it's probably that big around. Used a 20-inch bar on the Husqvarna that I just got, and I really wish that I had the 28-inch on there, but I've been trying to just fiddle fart around with the 20-inch to, you know, get used to using a 20-inch bar, because I'm used to using the big bar, you know. But then I got my top handle saw that I use for up in the tree. We'll talk about those too. All right. Let me start over here in a second video, and we'll start getting into some of these things to do with tree work. I'm actually going to start working on a tree today. Big tree. And needs to come down. I hate to do it because that one's a nice one and it's alive and it's healthy, but it has to come down because it's in a dangerous situation. See you in another one.